This is Richard Wolff from Democracy at Work, responding to an Ask Prof Wolff question sent in from our Patreon community, and in particular from Joshua Ickban, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Joshua asks, where does the money come from that's going into the $2+ trillion stimulus program passed recently by the Congress and signed by the President? And what does it all mean, and what are the implications? I'm glad you asked, because it gives me a chance to explain the costs of governmental economic policy. So first, the short answer to your question. The federal government wants to stimulate the economy. Why? Because the economy has collapsed. The reason for the collapse is not primarily the virus. As I have said before, viruses are with us. Viruses are part of life. Viruses periodically attack people and make them ill. They've done that for centuries. Over the last century, we've had several deadly viruses. This is not new. This is not surprising. The one in 1918 was devastating, killed 700,000 Americans. At least that's the major estimate. So what's collapsing our economy is not a virus. It's the failure to plan for the virus. It's the failure to arrange how best to cope with the virus. It's a failure to even understand how you would go about changing an economy so it wouldn't have to collapse in the face of something as well known as a viral pandemic. You all know this story, and I'm not going to go over it. Private enterprises didn't find it profitable to produce and store tests and ventilators and gowns and beds and hospitals, so they didn't. A government trapped in the logic and ideology of private capitalism didn't come in to fix and compensate for the failure of the private profit-driven sector. So we weren't ready, we weren't prepared, and our economy has stopped. So what is the government doing? Throwing money at it and hoping that that works. It probably won't. We threw money at the crash in 2000, so-called dot-com crash. We threw money at the crash in 2008 and 9, the so-called subprime crash. Throwing money was not a solution. It got us through the worst of the crisis, but it did so in a way that set up the basis for the next crisis, which we have now. Simple example. In order to deal with the first two crises, 2000, 2008, the Federal Reserve pumped the economy full of money and lowered interest rates to next to nothing. What happened? Every company in the country that had a problem, a mistake in its planning, an investment that didn't go well, workers who demanded higher wages, every problem you can imagine for business was solved in the easiest, cheapest way for the business to do it, which was to go to the banks and borrow limitless amounts of money at virtually no interest cost, so they did so. So when the virus arrived, we had a corporate sector that was up to here in debt, greatest level of debt American business had ever been in. And if you can't get your normal profit, you can't earn the money to pay your debt, and so the whole thing falls over. Viruses hurt your profitability, but if you hadn't had the level of debt, the ramifications of an interruption in your profits would have been less economic, less general, less cataclysmic. Okay, so what's the government doing? Throwing $2 trillion. That's not going to solve much, and it isn't going to do better than the last two solutions of throwing money. Didn't solve the problem either, because look where we are. How does the government get the money? It borrows it. It's very important for us to understand. The $2 trillion that the government decided to spend to stimulate this economy is borrowed money. Now, partly you understand, of course, that it has to be. Because if the government tried to tax the system to get that money, it would be pulling money out, which is the opposite of stimulus, in order to pay for stimulating. They would cancel each other out, so that's out of the question. They're going to borrow the money. They're going to borrow from the people who have money to lend to a government. Big banks, insurance companies, large corporations, wealthy individuals, and foreign governments. It might strike you to know that the American government has repeatedly borrowed from foreign governments to cope with the difficulties of American capitalism that require government throwing money at the problems. The largest creditor of the United States is the People's Republic of China. And you know what that means? Every year, the American government has to tax you and me to raise money which it doesn't and cannot use for highways or scholarships or hospital. It has to take that money and pay interest to the People's Republic of China on the borrowing the U.S. government has done from the People's Republic of China. Think about it. It's borrowed money. And what it means is that the government is even more in debt than it already was. The same Republicans who like to worry about the government debt took the lead in getting this stimulus plan through. It's money going to be thrown around at every business, large, medium, and small, and a check of $1,200. Not enough, heaven knows. But none of this is. This is all too little and too late. But it's going to be popular, and hopefully Mr. Trump will get reelected because that's what's behind this. Solving the problem? Of course not. It's not enough money. It's going at businesses who aren't going to use the money in a productive way because they can't. People won't buy from them in any case because of the virus. People won't come to work in any case because of the virus. On and on. You have to intervene in the economy in a structural way to get production to be done in circumstances that are safe, 6 feet apart, tested all the time, make sure no one's sick, identify with tests. We can't do it. And the private sector is afraid of letting the government do it in any case, because then the government is showing everybody very dramatically that the private capitalist sector, having now crashed 3 times in the first 20 years of this new century, needs bailout after bailout, trillions of dollars, many of them coming from our taxes, to keep this leaky capitalist boat afloat. It's going to worsen the debt. It's going to change nothing in the basic organization of the economy. So throwing money this time, like throwing money the last 2 times, leaves the basic economy unchanged and therefore points us directly at the next crisis and crash, which will be triggered not by .com, not by subprime mortgage, and not by a virus, by whatever else comes along to knock over the broken, inadequate, vulnerable capitalist economy that we continue to permit to govern our lives. This is Richard Wolff for AskProfWolff, a very important part of our Patreon community whose support we welcome and appreciate.